There are moments when the world around us just feels off. A misplaced shadow, a voice with no source, a road that leads somewhere it shouldn't. Most people dismiss these as tricks of the mind, the byproduct of exhaustion or imagination. But some know better. Some listen to the whispers. The whispers come from the spaces in between, from echoes of lost time, from doorways that were never meant to be opened. They are warnings, secrets, glimpses of the unknown, murmuring just beyond the veil of reality. Some speak of things that have already happened, others tell of what's still to come, and a few are invitations. Most people ignore them. They turn away, pretending not to hear. But you have chosen to listen. And once you do, there is no turning back. Welcome to Whispers from the Other Side. Episode 3. The Phone That Shouldn't Ring. A ringing phone is usually an invitation, a voice waiting on the other end, a simple exchange between two people. But for Lila, the call she's about to answer is not a simple exchange. It's a warning, a message from somewhere beyond the ordinary. Because in her new home, some things should remain unanswered, and some doors should never be opened. Act 1. The first call. The rotary phone was a relic of the past, a forgotten fixture in Lila's new home. When she first saw it in the living room, she had admired it in a passing way. How odd it looked against the backdrop of more modern renovations. Its dark exterior, the tarnished brass fittings, the receiver that seemed almost too heavy to lift, everything about it screamed of another time, another life. It seemed out of place in her sleek, freshly renovated space. Who used a rotary phone anymore? Lila couldn't even remember the last time she had used one. It felt like a thing of history, something meant to be preserved in a museum. But there it was, as though waiting for something, or someone. Lila dismissed it as a quirky decoration, perhaps left behind by the previous owners, something they had kept as part of the house's character. She didn't think much about it at first. After all, with everything else on her plate, boxes to unpack, rooms to organize, why should a relic of the past warrant any attention? Late one evening, after a long day of unpacking, Lila sat on the couch in the living room, taking a moment to relax. The house was quiet, unnaturally so. No sounds of traffic from the street outside, no hum of appliances in the kitchen. Just the silence, and the occasional creak of the house settling around her. She could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, its rhythmic sound almost too loud in the stillness. That was when it happened. The sharp, mechanical trill of the phone echoed through the otherwise quiet house. The sound cut through the silence like a blade, its shrillness rattling her bones. It wasn't like any phone she'd ever heard before. No soft ring, no gentle chime, but a harsh, shrieking noise that seemed too loud for the small room. It felt out of place, unnatural. Lila froze. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment she couldn't move. The sound of the ringing phone seemed to take over the room, reverberating off the walls, filling the space with an unsettling energy. It was as though the house itself was alive, demanding her attention, beckoning her closer. Her feet felt like lead as she slowly rose from the couch, her mind racing with a mix of curiosity and dread. She glanced around. The phone kept ringing, demanding to be answered. Lila approached it slowly, every step feeling heavier than the last. The closer she got to the phone, the more it felt as though something was pulling her in, something beyond her control. The sound grew louder with each step she took. She was nearly there now, and the air seemed to thicken around her. When she finally reached it, the ringing stopped abruptly, as if the phone had sensed her presence. She hesitated for a moment, the receiver hanging there like a strange, silent invitation. There was a heavy weight in the air, a tension she couldn't explain, but a part of her urged her to pick it up. Her fingers brushed against the cool, dusty surface of the receiver, and she shivered as she lifted it. The weight of it in her hand felt odd, foreign, as if it didn't belong in her grip. It was an object out of time, and somehow that made it more unsettling.
Hello?
Her voice was tentative and uncertain. The static crackled in response. At first it was faint, like the buzz of an old machine, struggling to come to life after years of disuse. It was just noise, but the noise felt alive. It buzzed and hummed in the space, vibrating the walls, filling her ears. And then a voice, faint, distant, almost too soft to hear, yet unmistakably human.
Don't go into the basement.
Lila's breath caught in her throat. Her heart skipped a beat, and her body froze. The words hung in the air, their meaning clear and horrifying. The voice was thin, weak, yet piercing. It was her own voice, but not her voice. Something about it was wrong. And the words haunted her.
What?
Lila whispered, almost afraid to speak. She had heard the words, but they didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. The static continued, a low hum in the background. But it wasn't the same. It was different now, almost mocking, as if the house itself was laughing at her confusion. Then, silence. The phone went dead. The line went completely still, as if someone had snatched the call away, severing the connection without a word. Lila stared at the phone, her hands trembling as she touched it. The voice had been so clear, so certain, and yet it made no sense. She checked the phone, feeling around it with her hands. No dial tone, no phone cord. It was a relic, an antique. It shouldn't have worked, couldn't have worked. Her mind raced, trying to explain the impossible. Maybe the wires in the walls had crossed, or perhaps the phone had somehow been connected to an old, forgotten line that had somehow come to life. But no matter how many explanations she tried to force into her thoughts, none of them made sense. The phone hadn't been connected to anything. There was no basement in her home. There was no logical reason for that voice to have reached her, and yet the words lingered in her mind, repeating over and over.
Don't go into the basement.
The house felt colder. The silence felt deeper. Lila's stomach twisted with a growing sense of dread. She could feel it now, the feeling that she was no longer alone. Something was watching her, waiting. And it wasn't just the phone. It was the house. The house itself felt alive, and it was pulling her in, trying to draw her deeper into its secrets. A deep breath escaped her lips, but the tension remained. The words from the phone seemed to taunt her now, lingering in the air like a curse. She could feel them pressing on her chest, making it harder to breathe.
Don't go into the basement.
Her mind spun, her thoughts tangled in knots. But no matter how hard she tried to push the voice out of her head, it stayed there. A warning. A threat. A sign of something far worse that she hadn't even begun to understand. Act 2. The Hidden Door. The next day, a gnawing unease settled over Lila like a heavy fog, thickening the air around her, suffocating the calm she had hoped for. The eerie echo of the phone call from the night before still rattled in her mind, refusing to be shaken off. She tried to brush it off, telling herself the call had simply been a prank, a glitch, perhaps, from old wires crossed, or a forgotten connection that had somehow still lingered in the walls of the house. It was an easy explanation, but something inside her refused to accept it. The house felt off. It wasn't just the phone call. There was a lingering sensation, an oppressive feeling that she wasn't alone in the space. A presence and energy seemed to be seeping from the walls, from the floor, from every creak and groan of the house. And no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, the feeling remained, following her through each room, making her stomach twist and her breath catch in her throat. It was then that she noticed them. Scuff marks, barely visible, but unmistakable. They weren't the result of moving furniture or general wear. These marks were deliberate, etched into the floorboards right in front of the bookshelf, as though someone had dragged something heavy across the floor. The pattern was clear someone had been there, and the thought sent a shiver of dread down Lila's spine. The marks were fresh, not ancient, and they seemed to lead directly to the bookshelf. Lila's mind raced. Her pulse quickened as she knelt down, inspecting the marks. Could someone have come in while she was asleep? A trespasser? Or had this place always been like this, and she simply hadn't noticed before? Her stomach tightened, and a cold sweat beaded on the back of her neck. Slowly, she pressed her hand against the bookshelf, feeling for anything unusual. A latch, a hinge, anything that would explain why the floor was worn in that spot. She ran her fingers along the rough wood, searching for a hidden mechanism. There had to be an explanation. She had lived in the house for days now, and nothing about the bookshelf had seemed odd. Then, suddenly, there was a soft click. The sound seemed to echo in the silence of the room, sharp and unmistakable. The bookshelf shifted. The weight of it moved more easily than it should have, the wood groaning faintly under her touch. A cold thrill ran through Lila as her breath hitched in her chest. She froze for a moment, fear rushing through her veins. What had just happened? The bookshelf had never felt like this before. It was as though it had been waiting for her, anticipating her touch. With trembling hands, Lila pulled the bookshelf aside, its wood sliding easily over the floor, revealing something she hadn't known was there. A hidden door. Her heart skipped a beat. Old, weathered wood lined the doorframe, thick layers of dust and cobwebs clinging to the edges. The door was small but sturdy, its surface cracked with age, its wood darkened by time. She stared at it, her mind racing. Had that always been there? Had she missed it in all her hurry to move in, distracted by boxes and the demands of settling into a new place? Lila's fingers hovered over the doorknob, her breath caught in her throat. The air around her seemed to thicken, pressing in on her from all sides. The house felt even more oppressive now, as though the walls themselves were closing in. She felt the doorknob beneath her fingers. It was cold, so cold that it sent a shiver racing up her spine. It felt wrong, as though the temperature of the room had shifted with the touch of her hand. Despite every instinct telling her to turn away, Lila's fingers curled around the knob. She couldn't explain why, but she had to know. She had to see what lay beyond the door. With a slow, trembling motion, she turned the knob and began to open the door. Beyond it, a staircase leading down. Her throat went dry. The sight of it paralyzed her, and her breath caught in her chest as she stared at the descending stairs, disappearing into the impenetrable darkness below. The house felt even colder now, as though the temperature of the room had plummeted with the revelation of the hidden passage. A voice seemed to echo in her mind, a whisper from the past, a voice that seemed to come from somewhere deep within the house.
Don't go into the basement.
The words from the phone the night before rang in her ears, now impossibly louder, as if they were speaking directly to her. They seemed to reverberate within her, pulling at her, taunting her with an unseen force she couldn't explain. The whisper beckoned her forward with a magnetic intensity, urging her to turn back, but also pulling her toward the darkness.
Don't go into the basement.
The words danced through her mind, looping like a sinister mantra, refusing to let go. Lila's pulse raced in her ears, and a knot of panic twisted in her stomach. Every part of her wanted to turn and run, to slam the door shut, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But her legs felt heavy, her body frozen in place, as though the house itself was preventing her from leaving. She slammed the door shut, gasping for air as her heart pounded in her chest. The weight of the decision pressed down on her like an unbearable burden. She couldn't go any further, not yet. She had to think. She had to figure out what this all meant. That night the phone rang again. The sound sliced through the air like a blade. Lila froze, her breath hitching as the sharp trill echoed in the house. This time she didn't answer it. She couldn't. She knew what would happen, what she would hear, and yet she couldn't bear to listen again. But something did. She heard the receiver click, followed by a sound that made her blood run cold. A low, steady breath. It wasn't just the air moving. It was breathing. Slow, deep, heavy. And now, it knew she was there. Her heart raced. The breath was too close. She wasn't alone. Act 3. The Descent. Lila didn't sleep. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, the images from the phone call and the strange door behind the bookshelf replayed in her mind like a broken record, endlessly cycling through her thoughts. Each echo of that voice sounded louder and more urgent the longer she stayed awake. The house felt different now, alive, like it was watching her, waiting for her to make the wrong move. The old floorboards creaked in places that didn't make sense. The walls seemed to breathe, their steady exhale rattling the window panes. No, it wasn't just the house, it was something in the house, something that had always been there, lurking in the shadows. And now, it was waiting for her. Her eyes darted around the room, half expecting to see something lurking just outside her line of sight. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had, each second stretching longer, more oppressive. At 3:00 a.m., the phone rang again. The shrill, cold trill sliced through the thick silence of the room, its sound cutting into her like a sharp blade. It was as impersonal and distant as a death sentence. Her stomach dropped. The sound was unmistakable now. It wasn't just some mechanical glitch. It was deliberate. It was calling her. She slammed her hands over her ears, hoping to block it out, but the sound reverberated through the walls, around her, inside her skull. Her heart began to race in her chest, each beat reverberating so loudly she was sure it could be heard through the entire house. The ringing persisted, once, twice, each time louder, more insistent, until it seemed to fill every inch of the room. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the ringing stopped. A suffocating silence followed. But it wasn't the same silence. It was heavier now, thick with something unseen, pressing down on her. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Lila's eyes flicked to the shadows, and then creak. It came from deep within the walls, followed by a slow, deliberate groaning, as though the house itself were shifting, moving. From somewhere below, a deeper sound reverberated. The creaks were no longer random. They were purposeful, like footsteps or something, or someone waiting. The air grew thick with tension. Her breath became shallow, the weight of the house pressing in from every side. She could feel it now, that same pressing sensation she had felt earlier, the one that had made her freeze in the hallway when she first noticed the door.
Something is down there. It wants me to come closer.
Her hand trembled as she reached for the flashlight, the small beam of light shaking as it cut through the darkness. The light flickered briefly before illuminating the shadows in front of her, casting the room in a ghostly glow. She had to know. She had to know what was waiting below. Lila's breath caught in her throat as her hand hovered over the bookshelf. She had already moved it once before, but now it felt different, heavier, as if the house itself had grown unwilling to let her through. With a strained grunt, she pushed against the weight of the bookshelf. It shifted with a soft scrape, and the sound echoed through the room. But it was different this time, almost welcoming. The door behind it seemed to open with ease, as though it had been waiting for her to return. It knew. The stairs stretched downward into the pitch-black void. There was no light, no sign of anything familiar, just the oppressive dark swallowing the path ahead. Lila stepped forward, her feet uncertain on the wooden steps, each one groaning under her weight as though protesting her descent. The wooden treads felt uneven, unsteady, almost as if the stairs themselves were made of fragile bones. The temperature dropped with every step. The chill nipped at her skin, crawling down her neck, biting into her limbs until they felt numb. The deeper she went, the stronger the feeling grew. Something was down there. Watching. Waiting. She couldn't shake the sense that she was being pulled in by something far darker than her curiosity. As her foot hit the bottom of the stairs, her flashlight illuminated the space before her. A basement that felt both abandoned and ancient. Dust hung thick in the air, suspended like a heavy fog, and the walls were lined with old wooden beams that groaned with the house's aging weight. There was a musty smell, a thick and stale air that only added to the eeriness of the space. Empty. No, not empty. A single chair sat in the center of the room, untouched, as if waiting for someone to occupy it. Its wooden legs were chipped, the seat worn with time. And beside it, the source of her torment, the old rotary phone. It sat there, its black surface gleaming eerily in the pale light from her flashlight. It rang. The sound was deafening, cutting through the silence with a sharp, biting shrill. Lila flinched, her entire body going rigid as the noise slammed into her. She wanted to run, to turn and escape, but her feet were rooted to the ground. The air around her thickened with dread. Her pulse hammered in her throat. Slowly, her hand reached out, her fingers trembling as they grasped the cold receiver. The static was instant. Louder now. More forceful. Filling her ears with a high-pitched whine that threatened to make her collapse. Then came the voice.
Why didn't you listen?
Her breath caught in her chest, a strangled gasp escaping her lips. It was like hearing her own voice call out from the depths of her soul, accusing her, taunting her. A gust of cold wind whipped through the room, its icy fingers pressing into her skin, stealing the warmth from her body. The wind howled through the basement, and the door behind her slammed shut with a deafening thud. She whipped around, her heart in her throat, and tried to push the door open. It was stuck. No, it was locked. Her hand scrambled against the handle, but it refused to budge. Panic gripped her chest. She pounded against the wood, desperately trying to break free, but it felt like the house itself was holding her there. Then came the sound, soft, shuffling steps from behind her. Her body froze, her blood ran cold. She turned slowly, dread pooling in her stomach. The air had become thick with something foul, something heavy that she couldn't place. And there it was, a figure. Tall, motionless, its shape indistinct in the shadows. The room seemed to swallow it, but she could still feel its presence, suffocating, looming over her. The figure stood just out of reach, watching, its eyes, or what she thought were eyes, glowing faintly in the dark. She could feel its gaze burrowing into her soul. And then it moved. It stepped forward, slowly, purposefully. Lila's scream caught in her throat as she stumbled backward, her flashlight flickering. The air seemed to crackle with energy, and in that moment, she realized, she wasn't just trapped in the basement, she was trapped in the house. Act 4. The Other Side. Lila's screams never left the basement. It was as if the walls themselves had swallowed her cry, her final plea echoing into the void of the house. Her fear had been swallowed by the darkness, leaving only silence in its wake. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the house, spilling across the dusty floors and illuminating the old furniture in the living room. It washed over the stillness like a cleansing tide, making the house appear peaceful, as though nothing had ever happened. The clock on the mantel ticked on, oblivious to the horrors that had unfolded within these walls. Everything was as it should be, or was it? The phone, once a harbinger of doom, sat silent now. It seemed almost peaceful in its stillness, as if it had never rung at all. Its dusty receiver lay undisturbed on the receiver cradle, the thick coil of its cord hanging loosely at its side. The room felt lifeless, but the kind of lifelessness that can only be felt when something unspeakable lingers beneath the surface of every object, every corner, and every shadow. The house had moved on from its latest tragedy, or so it seemed. But far below, beneath the house's weathered floors, in the basement where Lila had once stood trembling and gasping for breath, the story was far from over. The rotary phone sat in the same old chair, just as it had before, but now it was waiting. And then it rang. The sound echoed up through the walls, reverberating through the house like a bell tolling in the distance, calling out to anyone who would listen. The phone's sharp trill sliced through the morning calm, but no one was there to pick it up. Upstairs, the phone on the wall, a relic of the past, still intact despite the house's age, answered itself. There was no voice on the other end, only static. It hummed and crackled like an electric storm, charging the air with an unsettling energy. And then a voice, soft and distant, whispered through the static. Its tone was eerily calm, as if the words were meant to be a reminder, a warning, or perhaps a threat.
Don't go into the basement.
The words swirled and trembled in the air, twisting with malevolent intent. The voice sounded so familiar, yet so wrong. It was Lila's voice, if Lila had still been alive to speak. If she hadn't already become one with the house, lost forever in its darkened corners. And somewhere, deep below, in that same basement, muffled screams echoed through the walls. They were faint at first, barely perceptible, as though someone, trapped beneath the floorboards, was desperately trying to be heard. The cries were fragmented, broken, trapped in the very bones of the house, trapped in the air, trapped in time, waiting for someone new to listen. The house was calling. Who would answer? Lila had the chance to heed the warning, to let an unanswered phone remain unanswered. But curiosity, as it often does, led her somewhere she was never meant to go. Now, she has a new home, a new voice, a new purpose, waiting on the other end of the line, just another whisper from the other side. What are the whispers? A warning, a message, a glimpse into something beyond our understanding. Perhaps they are all of these, or none at all. But one thing is certain, they are always there, waiting to be heard. Tune in next time and listen closely, because the whispers are always there, and sooner or later, they will reach us all. Until then, keep your ears open and remember, some whispers should never be ignored.